Welcome to This About Us V2.0 podcast,
Huh?
where we're going to kind of take a deep dive into the January 2025 Wisconsin Tax Bulletin.
Okay.
This bulletin's like a cheat sheet
Right.
to help you stay updated on Wisconsin's tax world,
Yeah.
which, let's face it,
Mm-hmm.
can be a bit overwhelming.
Absolutely.
It's a lot to keep track of.
It is a digest of all the latest updates and reminders, and even some quirky cases straight from the Wisconsin Department of Revenue.
Yeah,
They're making sure both individuals and businesses are in the loop about tax laws and regulations.
exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Tax documents. Sounds thrilling.
Right.
But hold on,
Yeah.
because we're going to skip the jargon.
Right.
Get straight to the stuff that really matters to you.
Absolutely.
And trust me, there are some interesting tidbits buried in this bulletin,
Okay.
like a new tax on electric vehicle charging
Oh, wow.
and a case involving gambling losses.
Interesting.
So stay tuned.
It is fascinating to see how Wisconsin is responding to these emerging trends through its tax policies. This
Wow.
bulletin really gives us a glimpse into the state's evolving tax landscape.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So first up, let's tackle some general updates.
Okay.
The bulletin kicks off with a reminder
Yes.
about those annual business filing requirements,
Uh-huh.
specifically emphasizing the January 31st deadline
Right.
for sales, and-use tax returns,
Mm-hmm.
and withholding reconciliations.
So if you're a business owner in Wisconsin, double check your calendar.
Yes.
Make sure you're on track with those filings.
Yeah,
Missing these deadlines can lead to penalties.
exactly.
So it's best to stay ahead of the game.
Good point. And on a more serious note,
Okay.
the bulletin also stresses the importance of reporting identity theft
Right.
and data breaches.
Yeah.
They provide clear contact information for the Wisconsin Department of Revenue, should you ever find yourself in that unfortunate situation.
This really underscores how critical data security is becoming
Mm.
and the proactive approach Wisconsin is taking to protect taxpayer information.
Absolutely. Now, if you're scratching your head about certain tax rules or have specific questions,
Sure.
the bulletin outlines several ways to get answers
Okay.
from the Department of Revenue.
Right.
Their online Submit a Question page is a great resource.
Yeah.
And you can even request a formal private letter ruling for a definitive answer on a specific tax situation.
Oh, wow.
No more guessing games.
I think it's great that they're making it easier for taxpayers to seek guidance and
Yeah.
get clear answers.
Hmm.
It promotes transparency and builds trust.
Okay, let's move on to some income and franchise tax updates.
All right.
There's a whole section dedicated to what's new this tax season.
Hmm.
And there are some changes that could directly impact your finances, whether you're an individual or a business owner.
For individuals, there are some exciting changes this year.
Okay.
For one, they've integrated the IRS Direct File program with Wisconsin's free e-filing options.
So if you're already using the IRS's online tools, Filing Saint, your state taxes should be a breeze. And there's more good news.
Okay.
They've expanded the Child Independent Care Credit,
Mm-hmm.
introduced a capital gains exclusion on the sale of farm assets,
Wow.
and even increased the tuition subtraction.
Okay.
They've also added a new rollover option from 529 plans to Roth IRAs.
It seems like Wisconsin is trying to ease the financial burden on families
Yeah?
and encourage long-term savings.
Mm.
These changes could have a real impact on individual taxpayers' financial planning.
Now, businesses haven't been forgotten either.
Okay.
The bulletin highlights a boost to the refundable portion of the research credit, bumping it up to 25%.
This could be a game changer for businesses investing in research and development.
Yeah,
It makes Wisconsin more competitive and encourages innovation within the state.
absolutely. Plus, there are adjustments to the financial institution commercial loan income exemption
Mm-hmm.
and the angel investment tax credit.
Mm-hmm.
And for our non-resident business owners, there's been an increase in the withholding requirement threshold.
All of these changes point towards a concerted effort to attract businesses and investment to Wisconsin.
Beyond these specific changes,
Yeah.
the bulletin briefly touches on the different ways you can file your individual income tax returns.
Okay.
Of course, highlighting the convenience and benefits of e-filing.
Sure.
And for those concerned about tax fraud,
Mm-hmm.
they've dedicated a section to the Wisconsin Identity Protection PIN program.
This program adds an extra layer of security to prevent unauthorized access to your tax account,
Right.
which is crucial in today's digital world.
And before we move on, I wanted to point out the section on tax return donations.
Okay.
It's a reminder that when you filed your Wisconsin return, you have the option to contribute to various funds that support important causes within the state.
It's a simple yet powerful way to make a difference and directly support initiatives that benefit your community.
Right.
You can choose from options like the Endangered Resources Fund, the Cancer Research Fund, or the Veterans Trust Fund.
Now let's dive into some withholding tax updates specifically for non-residents.
All right.
The bulletin outlines how you can request an exemption from pass-through withholding tax.
The key is to file Form PW2.
Right.
But the due date depends on the specific type of pass-through entity involved.
Yeah?
The bulletin provides clear examples to help you navigate this process.
So pay close attention to those due dates
Right.
and make sure you're filing the correct forms to avoid any penalties.
Absolutely.
Now, are you ready for some news that could impact your shopping trips?
Let's talk sales and use tax updates.
All right, shoppers, listen up.
Okay.
The bulletin announces new county sales and use taxes
Uh-huh.
in Manitowoc and Racine Counties,
Okay.
effective January 1st, 2025 and April 1st, 2025, respectively.
So if you're shopping in those counties, you might notice a slight increase in your total bill at checkout.
Exactly.
Businesses operating in these counties also need to remember to update their sellers' permit locations to
Wow.
reflect these new taxes.
It's a good reminder for both businesses and consumers to stay informed about local tax changes that could affect their bottom line.
Yeah.
The bulletin also mentions updates to several publications related to sales and use tax,
Okay.
specifically publications 203, 220, and 240.
If you're in the manufacturing, grocery, or digital goods industries, it's worth checking out the updated versions of these publications
Yeah.
to ensure you're up to date on the latest guidelines.
Okay. Are you ready for some news that's sure to spark a lot of discussion?
Let's talk about the new electric vehicle charging tax.
This is definitely one of the most interesting updates in this bulletin.
Yeah.
It reflects how Wisconsin is adapting its tax policies
Mm-hmm.
to accommodate new technologies and shifting consumer behaviors.
Right.
The tax applies to electricity delivered by level 3 chargers and level 1 or 2 chargers installed after a certain date.
Okay.
And it's set at a rate of 3 cents per kilowatt hour.
It's important to note, though, that this tax does not apply to charging stations located at residences.
Right.
So EV owners who charge their vehicles at home won't be affected.
That's a good point to clarify.
Yeah.
However, if you're using a public charging station, you'll likely see this new tax reflected in the cost.
Mm-hmm.
The bulletin also states that station owners are now required to register with the Department of Revenue.
This registration requirement suggests a move towards regulating and tracking this growing sector,
Yeah.
which is inevitable as electric vehicle adoption continues to rise.
Now let's shift gears and delve into the enforcement report,
Right.
which usually highlights cases where individuals or businesses have run afoul of tax regulations.
In this bulletin, they featured a rather intriguing case
Okay.
involving a Racine County resident named Rico K. Farrell,
Mm-hmm.
who was convicted of operating an illegal bar and gambling establishment.
It's a story of blatant disregard for the law.
Wow.
He was operating without the proper licenses, ignored warnings from city officials, and ultimately faced the consequences.
Oh my goodness.
The bulletin details how his establishment was shut down,
Right.
and he faced a hefty fine.
This case serves as a stark reminder that tax laws and licensing requirements are not to be taken lightly.
Right.
They exist to protect consumers
Yeah.
and ensure fair business practices.
Mm.
Ignoring them can lead to serious legal and financial repercussions.
And if you're concerned about any potential violations regarding alcohol or tobacco regulations, the bulletin provides clear information on how you can report complaints to the appropriate authorities.
It's important for citizens to be aware of their rights and to feel empowered to report any suspicious activity.
All right, now let's wrap up this segment with a look at the report on litigation,
Okay?
which summarizes recent tax appeal cases that have made their way through the courts.
This time we have two noteworthy cases, the Daniel and Deborah Scheider case
Okay.
and the Wolfgang and Terry Hemschick case.
The Scheider case revolved around the deductibility of gambling losses
Uh-huh.
and raises some interesting questions about how far those deductions can go.
Interesting.
However, this particular case was dismissed due to a late filing.
The Hemschick case, on the other hand, focused on the TPOS credit,
Okay.
which is a credit for taxes paid to other states.
Right.
The crux of the matter was how to calculate this credit when Wisconsin only taxes a portion of capital gains.
Right. The Wisconsin Tax Appeals Commission sided with the Department of Revenue's interpretation,
Uh-huh.
which could have implications for how taxpayers calculate this credit in the future.
Okay.
But to really understand this case, we need to break down what the TPOS credit is and why this ruling matters.
Imagine you're a Wisconsin resident who also earns income from another state.
Mm-hmm.
you might end up paying taxes on that income to both states.
Yeah.
The TPOS credit is designed to prevent double taxation
Right.
by allowing you to offset some of your Wisconsin tax liability with the taxes you already paid to the other state.
So in the Hemschick case, they were specifically looking at how to apply this credit to capital gains.
Right.
That were only partially taxed by Wisconsin.
Yes.
The Commission's interpretation essentially means that the TPOS credit is calculated based on the portion of the gain.
Right.
That's actually taxed in Wisconsin.
Exactly. This clarification could have significant implications for individuals and businesses who invest in capital assets across multiple states.
Yeah.
It highlights the need for careful planning and a thorough understanding of state tax laws to avoid any surprises come tax season.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This whole bulletin really highlights the delicate balancing act states face when it comes to taxation.
Right.
They're trying to encourage economic growth and innovation while also ensuring they have enough revenue to fund essential services.
That's a great point, and it's especially apparent in how they're approaching the rise of electric vehicles.
Right.
On one hand, they're promoting EV adoption and investing in charging infrastructure, but on the other hand, they've introduced this new tax on public charging.
Yeah, it's like they're tapping the brakes a little.
Right.
While still trying to accelerate forward.
Exactly. And it'll be interesting to see how this strategy plays out in the long run. Will it hinder EV adoption by making charging more expensive, or will it ultimately contribute to a more robust charging infrastructure that benefits everyone?
Right.
Only time will tell.
Exactly.
Now, shifting gears back to that case involving Rick O'Farrell operating that illegal bar and gambling operation, it really makes you wonder how situations like that can go unchecked for so long.
It does raise questions about the effectiveness of local oversight and enforcement. The bulletin mentions numerous police calls and complaints from residents before any action was taken.
Right.
So it seems like there were missed opportunities to address the issue earlier.
It's a reminder that we as citizens also have a responsibility to report suspicious activity and hold businesses accountable for operating within the law. Our collective vigilance can help prevent these situations from escalating.
Speaking of accountability, let's circle back to those tax appeal cases.
Okay.
Specifically, the Hemschick case involving the TPOS credit. It's a prime example of how even seemingly minor details in tax law can have a significant impact.
Right, especially for those who might have investments in multiple states if you're in that situation. This case underscores the importance of understanding how the TPOS credit applies to your specific circumstances.
And it's crucial to remember that this bulletin is just a high-level overview.
Right.
It's not a substitute for personalized tax advice.
Exactly. If you have any doubts or specific questions about your tax situation, it's always best to consult with a qualified tax advisor. They can help you navigate the complexities of the tax code and ensure you're taking advantage of all applicable deductions and credits.
Now, beyond just providing information, I think this bulletin serves a broader purpose.
Okay.
It's about transparency and promoting a better understanding of how our tax system works.
It's like they're inviting us to peek behind the curtains, so to speak, by sharing updates on recent changes, highlighting enforcement actions, and even summarizing tax appeal cases. The Department of Revenue is showing that they're committed to open communication and accountability.
And hopefully this encourages taxpayers to be more engaged and informed.
Yeah.
Which ultimately benefits everyone. After all, the tax system works best when we all understand the rules and participate responsibly.
You know, this conversation about the evolving tax landscape and the need for transparency reminds me of something pretty relevant to this episode.
Okay.
As you know, we're presenting this deep dive as an About Us v2.0 podcast.
And for those who might not be familiar, this format is all about taking traditional About Us content,
Right.
which can often be dry and uninspiring,
Yeah.
and transforming it into something much more engaging and informative.
It's like taking a tax bulletin, for example, and turning it into a conversation that people actually want to listen to.
Exactly.
Now let's wrap up this deep dive with a thought-provoking question for our listeners. Do you think this new electric vehicle charging tax will ultimately encourage more people to adopt EVs, or will it have the opposite effect?
That's a great question.
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
It's a valid question, and I think the answer will depend on a variety of factors, including the overall cost of EVs, the availability of charging infrastructure, and consumer perceptions of the tax itself.
Right. Some people might see it as a necessary step towards funding the infrastructure needed to support EVs, while others might view it as a barrier to entry, potentially slowing down adoption rates.
It'll be interesting to see how the market responds and whether the tax revenue generated is effectively reinvested in expanding and improving EV infrastructure that will be key to its success.
Absolutely. And I think this discussion ties back to the broader theme of transparency and accountability that we touched on earlier.
Yeah.
It's crucial for taxpayers to understand how their money is being used and to have a voice in shaping these policies that directly impact their lives.
I completely agree. Open dialogue and informed decision-making are essential for creating a tax system that is fair, efficient, and responsive to the needs of our communities.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into the Wisconsin Tax Bulletin. We've explored a wide range of updates from business filing requirements to new tax laws and even peeked into the world of tax litigation.
And hopefully we've made this information a little more digestible and maybe even a little bit interesting.
Our goal is always to empower you, our listeners, with the knowledge you need to navigate the ever-changing world of taxes. So whether you're an individual taxpayer, a business owner, or simply someone who's curious about how the tax system works, we hope this episode has provided you with valuable insights and food for thought. Seemingly small policy decisions can ripple out and have a significant impact on industries and consumer behavior. This electric vehicle charging tax is a great example of that.
Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see if other states follow Wisconsin's lead and if this becomes a trend as electric vehicle adoption continues to rise.
It definitely feels like we're at a pivotal moment figuring out how to navigate this transition to a more sustainable future and how to fund the infrastructure needed to support it.
And this is where informed public discourse becomes so important. We need to have these conversations about how we want to shape the future and what role taxes will play in that.
Well said. And I think this Wisconsin Tax Bulletin has provided us with a lot of food for thought and a glimpse into how one state is approaching these complex issues.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from those essential business filing deadlines to exciting new tax credits, and even delved into the intricacies of tax litigation.
Hopefully we've demystified some of these topics and made them a little less intimidating for our listeners.
Remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to your finances.
Exactly. And speaking of knowledge and empowerment, I want to circle back to the concept of these About Us V2.0 podcasts. We've been exploring this Wisconsin Tax Bulletin in a conversational and engaging way, and that's really the essence of what these podcasts are all about.
It's about taking potentially dry or complex information and transforming it into something that people actually want to listen to and learn from.
And if you're thinking, hey, I wish my company's About Us page was this interesting, then you need to connect with Clinton Gallagher. His company, ClintonGallagher.com, is the driving force behind these innovative podcasts.
They specialize in helping businesses and organizations revamp their About Us content, turning it into captivating audio-video stories that connect with audiences on a deeper level.
So if you're ready to transform your About Us page from a snooze fest into a must-listen experience, head over to ClintonGallagher.com and see how they can help you tell your story in a way that truly resonates.
It's time to ditch those outdated About Us pages and embrace the power of storytelling. And that's precisely what Clinton Gallagher and his company, ClintonGallagher.com, specialize in.
Yeah.
They're the masterminds behind these. About Us V2.0 podcasts, helping businesses and organizations connect with their audiences on a deeper level.
So if you're looking for a way to breathe life into your own About Us content, whether it's for your website, social media, or even a podcast, I highly recommend checking out ClintonGallagher.com.
They can help you turn those static pages into dynamic and captivating stories that capture attention and build lasting relationships.
Now let's wrap up this deep dive with a thought-provoking question for our listeners. We've reached the end of our deep dive into the January 2025 Wisconsin Tax Bulletin. We hope you found this exploration informative and maybe even a little bit entertaining.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and remember, taxes don't have to be taxing.
Bonjour, comment ça va?
Tell everybody. Okay?
Bye. Come back soon.